Hello, everybody. This is a panel discussion. The topic is what were the two good things and the two bad things that India did in its first 20 years, 1947 to 67, that still resonate today, that still have an impact today. I've already done a video with my views. In my opinion, the two good things are one, electoral democracy, no armed forces, peaceful transfer of power. Seems very banal, but it's not usual in the world. Number two, we had the Green Revolution and went from food short to food surplus in a very short period of time. The two bad things are one, we never understood China. We had a disastrous war in 1962 where we lost badly, and we are still struggling to figure out whether China is a friend or a rival or a threat or what. And the second bad thing is that the union government usurped far more power than in the constitution. And now, with a diverse country and a diverse economy, we are facing slow economic growth because the chief ministers are not accountable for anything. Okay, that's it from me. So we are going to have first Meenakshi Hooja. She's my younger sister. She's a retired senior IAS officer. So she'll go first, and then Amit Shah. Others are supposed to join. Maybe they will join. We don't know. But look, Meenakshi, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening from here, everyone. Now, in my opinion, the first good thing which has lasted, but maybe is under challenge, is the building of political institutions. And I think they matter a lot. Of course, Subodh has referred to electoral democracy, but there are other institutions which, in a way, came from the constitution, from the decisions taken in the Constituent Assembly, and of course, they were a repeat of or substantial part was 1935 Act, but with a few things added. So you can say they were a continuation of the system, but that was very good at that time. One has to see things in context, and so the Constitution itself, the meetings of the Constituent Assembly, the formation and election of Parliament, and getting representatives, having state assemblies elected throughout the country, setting up independent judiciary, of course, on British pattern, but more related to the independent setup, and elections, immediate suffrage, and the way of the conduct of the election. We often talk of session and others, but the initial elections were carried out very well, and that was an achievement. We also set up very soon a Panchayati Raj 3-tier system, although, and that was also a grassroots attempt at decentralization, delegation, where we found that the community development was not working well, and people were putting the fertilizer behind the houses. So we had a good setup of federalism and, more important, intergovernmental relations. And at that time, I felt people were rather free to express their views. There was not that domineering thought. It is so that way, some of the things have continued. For instance, in Rajasthan, Janaran Vyas was a well-known leader, but the young Mohanlal Sukhadia, there was a contest for chief ministership after Congress had won, and he defeated him, and Nehru, though he liked Janaran Vyas, accepted Mohanlal Sukhadia as the leader. So that way one can say some kind of democracy was set in the early first decade, and it worked well till some time, of course, and now also we have a democratic setup with some kind of idealism, but as many people feel that some of the basics are under threat and challenge, but still people like us are quite hopeful and idealistic, and sometimes the voters, they completely everyone thinks that this party will win, and they completely unsettle your expectations and predictions. So that's one. Secondly, I felt that our international position, though Subodha said we didn't understand China, but India got its international position not only from the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and a few other leaders, but and Rabindranath Tagore, but also because of the non-aligned movement. I think at that time, to think of not joining either of the powers and staying, uh, on your own, and this non-alignment and becoming a leader of what was that time called Third World made a huge difference. We got a place in the world. We say now we are globalizing and this and that, but India got its first shot. And as a result of India's performance, and especially the role of Mahatma Gandhi and a few others, including Netaji Bose, many of the countries got decolonized. And therefore, definitely we were leaders. A chance we lost later because of Pakistan and the China war. That is true. But even today, people remember us for the initial conferences, the Bandung conferences, and the other things that have developed today. And actually, in my opinion, this is what has given India a position of its own, irrespective of the party in power. And at that time, again, I may mention, we used to feel very proud of being Indian. And we liked other leaders also. It's not that we were, very limited and we had to do only Indian things. We were world citizens even then. And we used to like the leaders, Kennedy and all, and have our views on Russian leaders, the prime ministers of England, etc. So we were we were put in top category, or not top category, but having a good place in the globe. About the bad things, I don't know why to call them bad or good, but I think they were they were not, we could not take care of these issues. And one of the things that comes to my mind, which may not come to other people, is lack of focus on consumer satisfaction, on quality of goods and products, services, and setting up some kind of labs for testing food, medicines. Although institutions were set up, but somehow they did not get the priority they should have got, because there used to be so many cases of people, eating bad food and food poisoning even then. So, and the products and services even today, they're most unreliable, including medical gadgets and appliances. Medicines are not reliable, tests are not reliable, and the BP meter will show some BP, other time other BP. And there are severe problems on this front, and we all are getting adulterated and over chemicalized food and even synthetic milk. I think if we had focused a little more, as Gandhi had said, that consumer is king, we would have perhaps done better. We had set up acts, etc. But there is no machinery at the ground. I know it from my experience in government that there is nobody really, inspectors, trained staff in the medical department who can check such a wide variety. And there is somehow no idealism in society to give quality goods. And the enforcing agencies are very limited and unable to cope with the massive problem that is growing and growing and growing. Nobody even knows that weights and measures, there is an inspector or a department. So you can sell 900 grams, 1000 grams. The second thing I would like to say is that somehow corruption, though there was idealism in the country that we had won the freedom, and there was, despite partition, and we were doing well, we had settled the integration of states. But I think corruption was not a focus. So the low-level corruption, especially in departments like police, excise, revenue, and others, just had fertile ground. People were willing to give, and so there was two types of corruption. One was the extortion, for giving you copies, for giving you assistance, for giving you your rights, etc. And that is because there were too many sovereign functions at that time. That was understandable. But if you had to get a certificate from the BDO or the Tehsildar, you couldn't go anywhere else. You had to get it from him. Even today, there are sovereign functions of the government, though they may have involved private sector, but still it remains a sovereign function. So corruption set it at low level, and then gradually it came up. There were charges against senior ministers, officers, etc. And then committees were set up against corruption, Santhanam, etc. And they continue. But my assessment is that perhaps it could not be checked at that time. We were just a new country. We were coping with so many problems. But now it's really very high at all levels. So that obviously you can't get quality goods, you can't get things done on time. There was a recent report in our local newspaper that out of 3,400 cleaners in the Jaipur Municipal Corporation, the outside the Pink City, only about 1,400 report. And that also, some of them only sign the register. And nobody reports from the 2 to 4 slot. So there are 2 slots. So obviously, this is just one example, and we know of so many others. Chief Secretary is going to jail. Can you imagine? So idealism, it grew worse and worse, and with the people getting more realistic, let us say, or practical, and giving up idealism, this has gone. So many parties have won elections on that, but I think it's a very sorry state of affairs and affects our daily life and our medical treatment, health, everything. So this is what I have to basically say at the initial stage. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, Amit, you are there. So it's your turn. Let's go ahead.
Yes, I'm so glad that Meenakshi went before me because she's kind of set the tone to what I'm going to say. Because one of
We're only
the
seeing you. We're only seeing some picture, Amit. We aren't seeing you.
oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry. I clicked on the wrong thing.
That looks like some alien with horns. Go ahead. All right.
So yeah, so at at independence, India with over 500 princely states was there was no constitutional setup at all. And that was an enormous task to bring all these different states into the union. And as Meenakshi said, that the setup of the government and the constitutional government and the assemblies is really underrated. I think that was one of the great uh, things that India did very, very quickly to create a country or give it some kind of a structure. The other one was literacy. That at partition, there were like 12% of the people who were quote unquote literate, who could write their name and their address, whatever the measure was, which one can imagine that there were so many areas to focus on. And Nehru did jump into the literacy part and tried to jumpstart it, and not only with the IITs, but various institutes, or schools of architecture, statistical institute, etc., that has held up, that has given India, if not an edge, at least a solid grounding that is well known in the world today. But there's a but to this, because there was the enormity that India faced. This is where the planning kind of fell down. So I'll jump into the bad part of the education, which is that, yes, there were hundreds and hundreds of schools set up and over time, in rural areas, primary schools were free, are free, etc. But the quality was not monitored. And this is what Subha's point about chief ministers, about regional administration, where primary school education is almost worthless. Most people are not getting an education. They get into high school. That education is also extremely flawed. So education really does lack, and it's a ragged situation. The top tier are fine. There's a growing middle tier, but they have to really struggle. And through my work with the NGO, FEA, I see the problem of education front and center because they're just not prepared. And they're not going to be able to be successful in the country. And what is that country going to do then with these millions of people? So I think that focus, especially in rural and outside of the cities, that's a bad thing right now. I mean, it's okay to think about, southern states and Delhi, where the schools are functioning very well, but for the most part, they're not. And people can't have, only the well-off can go to private schools, and the competition is so huge. Okay, the other part that was really visionary, but didn't turn out to be that good a thing, which is the panchayat system. That was a grassroots visionary idea in a rural economy, in a rural country. It had tremendous, it made a lot of noise when and people from abroad came and they studied the panchayat system, etc. But what it has become is two things. One is that the corruption and the social divisions have become embedded. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. For the most part, it has become part and parcel of the discrimination, depending on which area we are looking at. So I think that this is where the chief ministers, the civil bureaucracy, the collectors, district magistrates, come into play. And what's the motivation? That I think that people, as they get disillusioned, as Meenakshi was saying, it affects the governance of the country. And, I talk to a lot of young people, and my first question is, if you're looking for a government job, you have to tell me in your own words why, and it can't be for money, and it can't be for how powerful you're going to be, and those two, that's the stump question. Yeah, so that's what I have, and I'll end it there.
Okay, let Partho have a shot at it, and then we can come back to the rest of us. Partho, what are you hearing? At first, introduce yourself and then go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Partho. I'm currently a master's student in economics at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So, this was a very interesting and sort of insightful discussion. I mean, mainly because nowadays in this, extremely polarized sort of environment, especially with social media. You almost never hear about what India did go well. I mean, it's always criticism of this, that, and so on and so forth. But I think it's a good idea for the citizens to know that where India came from, that was like a huge sort of historical progress, and people should know that. I mean, despite all the problems that are going on at the ground level, at a more sort of central level. So yeah, I think that's a welcome sort of gesture. And I have a general question. So should I pose that right now, or we can
Please.
come back to that?
Yeah, pose it.
Yeah. So as Meenakshi said, I mean, we can understand why sort of certain problems crept up during India's historical journey, but now there's almost no excuse as to why these continue to permeate. So I just want to build up a very quick argument, especially with respect to this year's budget. So one of the big things that the finance minister is touting as a good policy intervention is the income tax sort of cut that has happened up to 12 lakh rupees. And while I understand the idea behind it, the sort of short term demand stimulus that will follow, I always wonder, this is also an argument that is put forth by Dr. Rajeshwari Sengupta from IGIDR. In fact, it was her op ed that I read. And the idea is that this sort of attacks a very small base of the Indian population. So I'm wondering, I mean, even for the short term, how much is this trade off worth it? I mean, why not focus on the structural problems, which are India's essentially? The major economic problem is structural, especially in terms of health and education. So, based on some statistics that I just quickly sort of read up in the past few years, India's education budget as a percentage of GDP has been hovering around 3 to 4%. In fact, it has gone down this year as compared to at least 6% for developing countries, and obviously all the developed countries, including China. I mean, developing for China, Japan, and so on. And in terms of health, it's even worse. It's 1.9% of GDP as of last year. This is data from the Press Information Bureau. And the global average spending on health is 10.3%. So what I'm wondering is, we all know that the budget is essentially a reallocation activity. Funds go from one place to another. And my question is, why is this spending so low? I mean, if India's problems are structural, if you want to attack it at the very core, sort of take a bottoms up approach, and especially in terms of education, target the primary schools, as everybody, as both Amit and Meenakshi have sort of mentioned, that IITs are there, IIMs are there, and they're doing pretty well, I would say. So why not increase this investment and take a look at the sort of long term? I mean, look at the returns that will come from this kind of investment instead of all the other kind of, the China plus one and this and that, which is not working. I mean, we are not globally competitive, and you can see that. So that was my question, that what are these major barriers? I mean, maybe other than, the petty political stuff, what are the structural barriers to this kind of sort of educational health investment? Yeah, that's the question I have.
Okay, it's open session. I'm hardly going to speak, so it's between Amit and Meenakshi.
Hello. So am I supposed to react?
Yeah, you can react.
Anybody, I mean, both, please.
Okay, Partho, you
everybody.
raise good points. I'll try to answer them, because one thing is that I'm not such an expert on finance and budget, but we do know accounts and expenditure rather well.
Right.
So one thing is that I would say that we had idealistic and a committed governance of fairness and development till Nehru and Shastri. They also held ethics and values, and they were able to lead the society. They simply didn't mirror the society. They were leaders. They said, we'll go ahead. And everyone believes, at least I do, that had Shastri continued, we would have had a completely different governance track, administration and government. And he really was down to earth, setting up Nabard, going to Amul, and finding solutions. But I think after that, because of compulsions of support, electoral politics, Ayaram, Gayaram, I don't know whether you heard of this, people who changed their political parties. The focus on administration and governance got little less compared to the previous years, and also to the political aspects. So if you are going to manage votes, and if you are going to manage these defectors, then you need money from other sources. So I agree with you that the budget on education and health should be much more, including also on infrastructure, education. But I would also, having done some work, would also like to share this experience that, okay, we have less staff, we have less good infrastructure, but in Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, there is no dearth of funds whatsoever to improve the school buildings. But who will do it? The teachers, the education officers. And you know, in Rajasthan, what is the system? If there are 4 teachers allotted to one school, one will go once a week and take all the classes. And he can get away because he can bribe the MLA, he can bribe the district education officer, anyone, and get his, even the sarpanch who now gives the attendance. So even the staff that we have has no zeal, no commitment, and only self-interest. And this is true for about 60-70% at least. And you know, I went to survey the midday meal scheme. Only in 1 or 2 schools I found that there was interest in the teachers, there were interest in the cooking ladies, and the children were enjoying the scheme. Once you serve a midday meal, attendance increases and quality of the receptivity increases. So somehow, because of union coming up in all the departments, associations building up, that there is so much pressure, plus there is individual pressure, and relatives and all are obliged, friends are obliged. So as a result of this, the quality of work of the civil services is definitely going down. And you can, apart from the fact that you have to run around, chakkar kaatne padte hain, pehle se bhi aur ab bhi, to get your work done. Apart from that, the corruption is rising. And people are joining services and taking 6699 attempts only to get into a place where you have some sovereign power. The motto of service is reducing. Okay, once you get in, you study very hard, you take coaching, this and that. But the motto of service is going, it's self-interest, and the society also wants it that way. Acha ladka shaadi ho jayegi, they'll get some power, they'll be able to use it or misuse it. And there are about 20%, 30% at a time who feel very committed to the country and are interested in secular and temporal issues. Let me tell you that this polarization today has also taken temporal issues out of the limelight. Focus is on spiritual and religious issues. So someone jokingly said, since they are now, we have, हमारे सब पुण्य पाप धुल गए, तब हमें governance से क्या problem है? We will reach our aim is to reach the parlok, and we are ready for it. So that way, this over-religion display has also pushed these issues into background, and somehow it has taken a different tail from the one that we had at the time of independence or in between. And now there is over-politicization of everything, and even selections for vice chancellors, school teachers, and fall certificates, they are on the rise. So governance is not it is mirroring the society rather than leading the society. If there are somebody is taking Dahej, then at that time it was checked and it was considered bad. But now somebody is taking a Dahej, there is a law against it and nobody is opposing it. Forget the government sounds. So they are not taking the leadership of change in their hands. They are just being led by society, and society, of course, is a mixed lot. Whatever suits a person or a group, they like that. They're not going to stick to standards. They're like Britain. We have no permanent interest. We don't have any friends or enemies. We have only permanent interest. What is the permanent interest? Self-interest at that particular point. So sorry for sermonizing, but since there are very few of us, so I thought I could just share with you. And definitely budget needs to be increased, but it also needs to be well spent. It should not line the pockets of a few. It should go to the Janta who are standing in queues in the best of hospital and not getting any place. I know of so many persons who simply refuse to go to a government hospital and pay through their nose. There is no scheme for OPD treatment in private hospitals for the Janta. There is one for government officers and government staff, none for the citizens.
Okay.
So there is.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will just add one line from a poem that one of my Vidped students sent me. She says, "Nitiyan kagaz mein kaid hai." Means, "Nitiyan kagaz mein kaid hai." Means all the good policies are on paper. You don't see them on the ground, because she says, and so many people have told me that, sir, the paper is good, but the ground reality is completely different. It's not there. And she finally, she has BA in history and Hindi from DU and is now at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, MA in Hyderabad. And she sent me a long poem, but I'll tell you the last line. नीतियां कागज में कैद है. They are stuck on paper. There's nothing, as Meenakshi said, when you go and see the midday school lunches, they are no good. Things are not working at all. So, okay, so I was so struck by that simple Hindi line, the nitiyan kagaz mein kaid hai. You don't see them running on the ground. Okay, sorry. Meena, that's very good. Okay, let's hear from Amit in response to Partho.
Well, that was very helpful because, I don't want to necessarily be ideological out here, but it's impossible not to be, because Partho's question, the basic question of where is the tax base? Why isn't it growing? That's a critical question. Here we are in a country that has more billionaires than most of the world. So I don't want to get into comparisons, but it is the US faces the same problem. Where is the tax base? How are we going to fund progressive programs? Now, is there a vision? And Meenakshi talked about that. There is no vision right now of really good governance. You have to break the mold a little bit. And this is where, Subodh, I've been following you as much as possible about your chief minister drive. Where is the accountability? What kind of programs can you implement that other states have been successful with? Like in Bengal, there is a program to provide bicycles to girls in middle and high schools in rural areas so that they can safely go to school. Okay, I heard that in some other states the bicycles are just piled up and distribution is nil. There is, the competition between states isn't helpful in governance of a country of 1.3 billion people. So where is the vision which a Nehru and a Shastri had, of driving, try to come up with solutions that work for India? It's okay to say we have the best IIMs and these MBAs. How many more MBAs do we need? For instance, how many people who are graduating from medical colleges, which is so hard to get into, are actually providing services to the majority of people in India? I mean, is there a program where they have to like devote 2 years, to a rural clinic or something? It's not about Teach India, which is for a small percentage of people. India has to think about itself as if it's trying to catch up like a China. China, okay, undemocratic Maoist China did certain things that India is not going to be able to do, understood. But it can have a vision that the national and the national drive, unity is now based on religion, which is not only unconstitutional but ungovernable, because it's only the division that is showing up, and not good governance. So I feel like I'm hopeful for India because of what I see in the young people, but the young people need something to grasp onto. The vast majority who are struggling just simply don't have a foothold, and gig economy is not an economy that is sustainable. So, what is the government? Do we need more history PhDs, or can we put programs in place and say, okay, we're going to give you some breaks out here if you go into this course, so that there is employment down the road, etc. Now, will this take away from people's aspirations? In a small way, but I think that for the most part, people are 17 years old and they're trying to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, give them the opportunity to do that. Don't say go to college, and get a bad degree, in the sense that you're going to get a BA, but it's going to be worthless. It's going to be as good as perhaps 12th grade, if that. I think that the vision is completely lacking, and we are mired in this divisive idea that
Yes.
That India cannot be that we can't have a discussion about the problems of India. I don't see that in the public sphere at all.
Yeah. Okay, so Partho, you would ask the question. You have heard answers. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, so definitely makes sense. And what I would like to add is that it's kind of another question, but in a sense of it being a sort of prescription, maybe a policy of prescription. So there's two things that can, broadly speaking, you have an absolute amount of funds that you can allocate to various places. And secondly, again, as Meenakshi pointed out, the usage of those funds. Now, I think the usage part is certainly something that has to do with the sort of, the vision and the vision points that Amit was talking about. And corruption at various levels, because people just deal with their own incentives and they don't have this broad idea about how the country or even their local, maybe the local constituency, has to sort of do well. I mean, it's just incentives at the individual level. So coming to the reallocation part, is it a better idea to essentially invest more into private education and maybe private healthcare and subsidize them so that they, because their incentives are much more aligned towards what is their profit? It's not necessarily as individualistic as it when it's compared to the government. So if their sort of funds are subsidized, and because poor people in rural areas, they tend to, as again Meenakshi talked about, that people tend to spend like a lot of their monthly income on just going to a private hospital. They will not go to a public sort of government hospital. And there's this, in terms of schools, there's this kind of pride and prestige that comes with teaching in a private school for the teachers and for the staff. So maybe you just ride this wave. Maybe you just reallocate those funds to the private sphere, so that what's already working to an extent, that works better. I mean, uh, vision is something that it has to be cultivated from the ground up, and maybe it's more of a long term thing. I'm not too sure how to go about this, but vision, corruption, and that, it's much more of a harder pill to sort of swallow and fight against. So yeah, I'm just wondering maybe what are the sort of perspectives on this.
Okay, Meenakshi.
Yeah, I'll
Amit, go ahead.
yeah, Partho, I think that the vision part is, for instance, to capitalize. If India were to capitalize on the idealism of the young and the energy of the young, okay, not treat the NGOs as your enemy. The NGOs, for the most part, are doing good work, but in a very small, in the framework of the country, it's a very small part.
Right.
Okay, incentivize. The government needs to incentivize young people toward certain needs, so that they don't do this through an NGO, but they do it through a government program, that is targeted to improve the economy, to improve lives, and you have to break away from this. It's not enough to say all the CEOs in Silicon Valley are Indian. That's a false equivalency. It's India is just sinking with that, because you look at my fear is the young people. I mean, you, Partho, are part of that, right? But behind you are millions in that age bracket, 17 to 30. And what's going to happen there when people talk about skills of the workplace in the late 21st century? That's my fear, is you're not only going to try to figure out China, but China is going to be like going to Mars, because look at Japan. China is going to be there. It has already. They're not going to lose in this global warfare, economic warfare right now. They're going to be the winners.
Okay.
So I think that, yeah.
Meenakshi, your turn.
Okay, one or two points. It's getting the time is ending. I would say that while we had a vision earlier, but the present vision, or whatever we call Viksit Bharat, though we are accepting the hierarchy of developed, undeveloped, less developed, developing, we should not accept it, but we are accepting it because we don't have original thinking, is basically focus on Hindutva and all kinds of views about the uh, Indian past traditions. And everything, including computers, everything can be found in the Vedas. So this is the dominant thought you must be knowing, at least in northern states. It can't be there in the southern states, but this is what matters. And we have become a nation. We've revived ourselves from colonial mentality, and now we are heading towards a Viksit Bharat. And so there is some sort of, I would say, brainwashing which has resulted in some kind of satisfaction amongst the people and even joy. They love these mandir yatras and rituals, and so many are going. Mahakumbh is just talked about, but you see all other fairs and festivals. They're crowded and crowded and crowded at every step, especially in our states and others. So that way, for the first, in the last decade, religion, rituals has become dominant compared to other bread and butter issues. But sometimes, at some point of time, they will explode, isn't it? If people will not get jobs that satisfy them, or they won't have good access to hospitals or access to good teachers, and you'll have so many restrictions that so and so can't teach, so and so doesn't have the qualification, somebody has got false certificate of B.Ed, he can teach, but a genuine parent can't teach. So, we are missing teachers, but there are any number of parents who are willing to teach, but they can't teach in a government school, while they are teaching in private schools and they are minting money and even giving good quality. So we have this huge diversity, inequality, but the dominant thought as of now, to me, appears to be only Hindutva and anti-thinking of other communities. And lot of conflicts going on. And I feel one solution, which I thought after the riots in Gujarat, that if you want to link people, if you want to produce jobs, if you want to bring in harmony, you have to follow some of the patterns which our previous state rulers followed, like in Jaipur, Bikaner, that you have to have interlinkages of trade and commerce between different communities. Then they will not be willing to fight at the drop of a hat, because they know that I get the bandhani sari from a Muslim weaver or a Muslim artisan and I'm marketing it. So the weaver, the arts person will also want that the relationship with the trader, though he may be exploitative, is essential for his happiness and survival, and the trader will also know. So that I cannot start going on and on about one community because he's actually my bread and butter. So if we are able to somehow, of course, we have to have a policy which keeps citizens as one. But once a chief minister can do it in the south or here, then wherever they get a chance, because all are not fully converted to this extreme thinking. So they can bring about more, at least harmony and some kind of prosperity, apart from focus on day-to-day issues. So I feel if this is one counter in my opinion I've been discussing also, that let's have some kind of shared businesses. So the rulers, what they did, Jaipur rulers, they brought a lot of people from other parts. And many of them were Muslims. Many of them were Sardars. They were good in jewelry, everything. So they built the temples. So that way, the Karigars, the Mangniyars and the Langas, they are Muslims and they are singing all the bhajans at every festival, including in temples. And people love it. So people are not so anti at heart. But if it is, forced upon them or a thought is given, then they get incited. So let us assume people are basically friendly. If there are shared linkages of trade and commerce and activities, then things are hopeful. And about the youth, yes, a lot of work has to be done to give them jobs, skills, and a place in society. Otherwise, there is depression, suicide, and people are not able to compete for IIT, IIMs, IAS, and what do? They just get frustrated. So we have to remove the sort of hype about these prestigious institutions and give importance to all the others also. I'm being a bit, you know, uh, anti-hierarchy or being more egalitarian. I think I've tried to say whatever I could. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Partho, your turn, and then I will summarize.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think, I agree with both of you, and I think it ultimately comes down to incentives. There's things that work, there's things that don't work, and centralized targeting rarely works. So, you have to go to the local context, as Meenakshi pointed out, especially between communities. If you can do that, if you create an economic incentive, then they don't have the incentive to, rebel, because now their money is at question. So I think that's a fair thing that policymakers probably should. That's probably the first thing that policymakers should consider when it comes to, especially policy dispersal at the local level. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you for this discussion. This was
Hang
very.
on. So I'm going to summarize, and then each of you will have the final word. I can never have the final word. So
No,
let me
summarize and have the final word.
No, I don't want the final word. It's my rule that the speakers have the final word. So I will summarize very short, briefly. The key things that I've heard are vision, institutions, and implementation. A lot of it we got right in the first 20 years. Not all of it, but quite a bit of it. The vision was there. The institutions were set up. But there were some mistakes too, and particularly, as Amit has mentioned, in education, we didn't get it right. We didn't get many things right. We didn't get Panchayati Raj right. But overall, there was vision, and there was institutions were set up which were functioning then and are still functioning today. Okay, and we are living off those institutions, and we mentioned IITs and IIMs. Well, they are still there and they are still functioning. Okay, they are not specific. They are okay. So, but the current situation looks like that we don't benefit from any new vision that is driving economic growth or harmony, etc. That is what I've heard. Okay, so that's it from me. But I'll just sneak in one last comment to answer Partho's question. I've stopped reading the union budget because it never says anything structural. Okay. It's minor tweaks in the income tax rates. What percentage of the people pay income tax in India? Is it what, 6, 7, 8%? Right? Something like that, pay income tax. So to have your main centerpiece of the union budget as the income tax tweak, which is affecting 6, 7, 8% of the people, that cannot be. Okay, so I'm not saying it cannot be. That's what the budget is for. So I've stopped even reading the budget in detail. I used to, I no longer do. Okay, so that's the answer to your question. That this is like, just tinkering with the existing system of put this rate here, put that rate there. It's not going to answer any structural questions. Okay, so let me stop here. Final word, Partho, you go first, then Meenakshi, and finally Amit. Final word.
No, I just want to thank you all for this discussion. This was good. And I honestly, there's a sort of black hole of where this, discussion converts into actual implementation. So I don't know how that will happen or what will incentivize people to actually work this out. But yeah, I hope to be part of that movement, and I hope to see how this progresses, because otherwise Viksit India 2047, Viksit Bharat is a hard goal to actually realize. Yeah, that's it from me. my side. Thank you.
Okay, Meenakshi.
Okay. Uh, if, as far as vision is concerned, as you said, there was a vision, that was a vision for the country. Now we also have a vision, but it doesn't encompass all the citizens. It's very divisive. So that's a very big problem, even for implementing anything, because you have to only benefit X, Y, Z. That's one. Secondly, about chief ministers, I think in the beginning we had very good chief ministers. People who could assert themselves, who had a name, B.C. Roy, Rajagopalachari, even Sukhadia, Jainarayan Vyas, who could be chief ministers. Now everything comes from the top. There is, even during Indira Gandhi's time and all, she used to dictate. In Rajasthan, even in Congress time, in 4 or 5 years, we had 3 chief ministers: Jagannath Padia, Shivcharan Mathur, and Haridev Joshi. So they were changed very often. So either they are changed or they are given instructions. So few of them only can able to assert themselves. And one I know, though he belonged to BJP, was Bhairo Singh Ji. He came up with new programs, he implemented them, and he had long meetings about everything, about the new Panchayati Raj Acts in our IGPRS, and he was a grounds person. So we perhaps need such visionaries who are actually interested in their state or are not afraid of doing things which they think are right for the state. So therefore, all the state list activities which are mainly temporal or can get off the ground and governance can improve. So that way, if the dictated the chief ministers are dictated to and slips come, then they, even if they want to be, they can't be very effective. But otherwise, all said and done, I think I'm hopeful about the country, because there are always some people who will be able to defy the system, the problems, and keep us where we ought to be. Thank you.
Okay, Amit.
Yes, it's been a great discussion for me, because I'm completely a layperson who happens to be from India, who left India a long time ago. But I try to follow it. And so, two things. One is, when things come from the top, okay, the all-knowing paramount leader is getting advice from where? From who? That is my question. I mean, who are the advisors at the national level? What are the bodies that inform the prime minister? Where is the leadership comes from there? So the vision part, when we started at 1947, 1950, that was very clear, who the advisors were and where the country was going. Now, right or wrong, they drove the country toward certain paths. Now, no one wants to question anything. Advisory boards are just on paper. Everyone's towing the line. So I think it becomes very difficult to have any kind of vision. The other part is the practice of, the best practices part from different states. The chief ministers are just fighting political battles. They're just trying to keep their slice of the pie. And the economics part is secondary, which, is disastrous in the long run, because we are simply fighting political battles, right? So we are not going to, the North is not going to look at the South, the East is not going to look at the West. So I find, once again, it comes to this national vision idea, is what is that? Perhaps it needs a different kind of set of advisors. I'm not saying that you have to have a planning commission, but there could be something that is targeted for 20 years, and that is the focus of the advisory board, because you want to get the country from point A to point B, and let the people decide. Let them know what's going on with that, and not just this top down, where, yeah. That's what I have. I feel like the democracy just exists on paper once again. Yeah.
Okay, let me summarize it in one sentence or 3 sentences. 3 words. The mood is hopeful but not optimistic. It's hopeful but not optimistic. So Partho, it's for your generation to fight that out. The current mood is hopeful but not optimistic. Okay. We are not seeing rocket growth, rocket movement, but it's hope. So summary is current situation. I mean, a lot of good things happened in the past. Some mistakes were made, but they were not major mistakes. Lots of good institutions were set up. But right now we are hopeful, but not optimistic. Okay. Thank you all. I tried my best to not speak much, which is very tough for me.
Okay.
All right, good.
Bye, Partho. Bye, Amit Shah, sir.
Bye. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Bye, Meenakshi. Bye,
Thank you
Partho.
so much. Okay,
Subodh,
bye-bye.
great work.
Yeah, all
You
right,
have
good.
so much
That's
energy, Subodh.
all right. That's it. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.